Candidate 4's face now looked completely bewildered, like he had no idea why such an obvious question was even being asked.
The one who has the highest chance of survival? I mean, my goal is always to save as many people as possible.
That's how the Supernatural Disaster Management Bureau is supposed to operate. Ryu Jaekwon stared blankly through the glass. Candidate 4's attitude might have been overly passive, but in reality, most highly competent Disaster Management Bureau agents tended to be a little off in some way. Trauma exchanged for conviction. In that sense, he was a textbook example of a viable candidate. Candidate 4's inner thoughts updated.
Not that I'd ever find myself in a situation where I'd have to make a choice in the first place. Something about that wording. That phrasing was far too deliberate.
Ryu Jaekwon and the assistant interviewers tensed up for a moment. Their eyes widened as they focused on the next line of text.
Well, I don't really have anyone I'd call a friend, so should I have just pointed out that this question doesn't even apply to me? Saying it's fine because I don't have friends sounds kind of embarrassing, though. No, I shouldn't say anything. Let's just try to make some new colleagues here. Fighting.
A heavy silence settled over the interviewers. Ryu Jaekwon could feel the assistant interviewers staring at him. Their looks were practically screaming. If you keep dragging this out and don't pass him now, you are officially the worst piece of shit alive.
Remove your oxygen mask and stand by.
Candidate Hafe gave a small nod and took off the mask. The instructions were the same as before, but everyone in the room, both the candidates and the interviewers, understood. Candidate Hafe had passed.
All 4 candidates who have completed the aptitude test, please move to the waiting area.
Beyond Candidate 3, who was being dragged out like a sack of potatoes, Candidate 4 adjusted his glasses in a slightly hunched posture before moving along, even though he had just taken a subtle hit to his dignity without even realizing it, which, ironically, made him all the more memorable as a successful candidate.
Looking forward to seeing where that guy ends up.
The assistant interviewers exchanged glances, silently agreeing.
If we ever run into that timid-looking candidate 4 again, we should keep an eye out for him.
Not that they needed to, because that answer had been calculated to produce this exact effect. I sank into a chair with a deep sigh. My knees were pressed together, making sure I didn't look too relaxed. But seriously, why the hell was Agent Bronze there? I almost passed out the moment I heard that guy's voice over the speakers. When I realized that one of the interviewers was Ryu Jaekwon, I thought I was completely screwed. But surprisingly, it actually helped me refine my character. A reserved, introverted agent with an unspeakable, tragic backstory but outstanding abilities. That was the character I had planned to play in the Disaster Management Bureau. To fit the role, I had spent weeks deliberately messing up my appearance before showing up for the interview. Being a bit withdrawn raises less suspicion than being overly smooth. After all, most Disaster Management Bureau agents had complicated pasts. I wouldn't seem out of place at all. Oh, was pretending to be shy mentally exhausting? I'm a naturally timid person after all. All I had to do was drop my social mask and let my anxious, cowardly thoughts spill out into the open. Honestly, this was still better than pretending to be an insane MZ employee at Daydream Inc. At least that's what I had to tell myself. I wiped the sweat from my face beneath my glasses. I had basically secured my acceptance, even with Ryu Jaekwon as an interviewer. The same agent who had once been spectacularly backstabbed by me had just passed me. Since I hadn't been dragged away by agents mid-interview, it meant he had decided to let me through. But now I have to hit him in the back of the head yet again. Because at the end of the day, I was a spy. I internally apologized while breaking into a cold sweat. I'm really sorry, Agent. Just one more time. But he's still a little suspicious of me, right? He passed me but was probably going to keep an eye on me. Maybe even reporting everything to his superiors, detailing my past ties to Daydream Inc. That would be a problem. Since I had already taken this path, I had to fully commit. There was no turning back. I need to work harder to completely solidify his trust in me. Before long, my number was called again. A confirmation of acceptance.
Candidate #4 from Group DA. You have passed. Proceed to the designated location.
That location was probably where the interviewers would finally show themselves, hand me my agent ID, and assign me to a temporary division. I was about to meet Ryu Jaekwon face to face. I didn't expect to run into my biggest threat on my first day as an undercover agent, but this is actually a good thing. Might as well resolve this issue now. I intentionally answered too loudly, then quickly lowered my voice as if I was panicking. After that, I scrambled to my feet and cautiously made my way forward. As I walked, I repeated my strategy in my head, the plan I had crafted for this exact moment. Operation Agent, I faked my death and escaped that insane cult company. Thus began my life as a fraudulent government agent. For the record, and just to make things absolutely clear, I swear I never meant for it to get this serious. Agent Bronze, Ryu Jaekwon, stood in a corner of the room, keeping any signs of restlessness off his expression. The room where the final successful candidates gathered. Several rounds of announcements had already called out the names of those who had passed, and most of the prepared seats were now occupied. Why isn't he here yet? As successful candidates were steadily called in and took their seats, the one person he had no choice but to pass still hadn't arrived. His number had already been called 3 times.
Candidate 4 from Group Da.
If that announcement repeated one more time, his application status would be put on hold. It would be considered an automatic forfeiture. He had gone through the entire aptitude test, only to give up now? Even Ryu Jaekwon himself found it incomprehensible. The frustration was starting to eat at him when the door to the already nearly full room burst open and a man stumbled in, his face flushed bright red. He was gasping for breath as if he had sprinted all the way here, and his suit sleeves and collar were dripping wet. The candidate who had been one call away from disqualification. From the looks of it, he had splashed water on his face out of sheer nerves. If he were really a spy, would he go out of his way to draw this much attention to himself? No. No leniency. Ryu Jaekwon pressed his lips shut, maintaining an unimpressed glare. Kim Soleum adjusted his glasses and quickly shuffled to the farthest back corner, sitting down quietly.
Are you okay? Here, take this.
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
At the kind offer of water, Kim Soleum startled so visibly that Ryu Jaekwon, knowing his true background, could see it all the more clearly. Like someone who had spent too long among corporate cultists in an immoral pharmaceutical company, where basic human kindness was an alien concept. Ryu Jaekwon said nothing. He simply watched.
We will now begin the appointment process. The Disaster Management Bureau's agent appointment ceremony. First, register funeral arrangements in case of death. Then, receive a temporary identification pass. A brief training orientation shall commence, and after that, there will be an overview of assigned missions.
There were no bureaucratic formalities like in the public sector, nor did it have the rigorous military training of special forces, because supernatural disasters, horrifying, unearthly anomalies, were not something any amount of training could prepare an agent for. Only experience could forge resilience, and most recruits were people who had lost family or loved ones to mysterious, unexplainable incidents. Even those who hadn't suffered personal losses carried a grim sense of duty, the unshakable knowledge that they had glimpsed the hidden world and could never turn back. That atmosphere saturated the room.
Candidates 4 from Group Da Kim Soleum.
Thank you, sir.
Kim Soleum bowed slightly as he accepted his temporary pass. Looking at him, his timid, withdrawn demeanor, it was clear that if someone with his personality had chosen to apply, it could only mean he had an unshakable resolve. Though, of course, there were also a few eyes filled with skepticism, as if wondering if he was just unqualified instead.
For the next 3 weeks, you will undergo training and supervised field assignments. At the end of this period, your permanent division placement will be determined. Until then, follow the instructions of your assigned senior agent without exception.
This was when the interviewers appeared, each one stepping forward to take direct responsibility for the recruits they had selected. That was standard bureau policy. Although, in cases where a match wasn't ideal, existing senior agents could also be assigned instead. But at the very least, for noteworthy recruits, the original interviewer was almost always the one assigned as their mentor. And in Kim Soleum's case, thanks to the subtle,
They will oversee your training for the next 3 months.
Ryu Jaekwon stepped in front of Kim Soleum. From behind his glasses, Kim Soleum's face went deathly pale. The exact moment he recognized him, Ryu Jaekwon could hear the quiet footsteps of Kim Soleum, his newly assigned recruit, trailing behind him. Then, As they entered an unmaintained, isolated room in a desolate corner of the aptitude test facility, leaving only the two of them inside, he heard the sound of something being pulled out. Ryu Jaekwon's hand moved instinctively, ready to subdue him.
I wanted to return this.
The temporary agent badge and pistol. The very items that had been given to temporary agent Grapes during the Sekwang Technical High School incident. Things that, in the chaos of the situation, even Ryu Jaekwon himself had forgotten about.
I should have returned them earlier, but I never had the chance. I apologize, sir.
Ryu Jaekwon studied Kim Soleum. If he had just kept his mouth shut, no one would have known. And yet, here he was, turning himself in, looking as if he had already accepted the worst possible outcome. As if he were fully convinced that the agent standing before him would report him as a corporate spy for that pharmaceutical company. Ryu Jaekwon's initial wariness simmered down.
Does that company know you're here?
A slow shake of the head. How could he possibly believe that?
As far as the company is concerned, I'm already dead. I was trapped in a darkness. A disaster, for over a month.
Kim Soleum's face turned slightly pale.
Once it's been over a month, they just assume you're dead. So as far as the company is concerned, I'm already a deceased employee. Or rather, a former employee.
They finalized an employee's status as deceased without even attempting a rescue. Ryu Jaekwon was momentarily at a loss for words at the sheer brutality of that system. But then another realization struck him.
You were trapped in a supernatural phenomenon for over a month?
Kim Soleum, still with his head lowered, gave a small nod. It felt like a hammer had struck the back of Ryu Jaekwon's skull. His gaze swept over the other man again. This was someone who had once been neat, composed, meticulous. Yet now he reacted to everything around him with quiet, careful hesitance. Like someone who had been irreversibly changed by a long, harrowing period spent inside a nightmare.
Don't tell me. You did it on purpose.
Who in their right mind would willingly choose to be trapped in a ghost story for over a month? Especially someone who had already experienced such incidents firsthand while working there.
But after I got out, I didn't report back to the company. On purpose.
Because that was the only way, to leave quietly, without causing any problems?
Kim Soleum took a deep breath, then at last nodded. Daydream Inc. was the kind of place that would cheerfully wave goodbye and say, "Dobby is free if someone wanted to quit." It wasn't that they wouldn't let you leave. It was just that no one ever did, because it meant throwing away every point they had painstakingly accumulated.
I don't regret it, sir.
But to Ryu Jaekwon, an agent unaware of how the company truly functioned, the situation seemed like a textbook case of a cult escape. A victim of psychological trauma, PTSD, gaslighting, who had suffered so much that he had to fake his own death just to escape.
I know I can't stop you if you decide to report me, but please, just don't make it public knowledge, sir.
He was afraid of being tracked down by Daydream Inc. Ryu Jaekwon realized it immediately. But outwardly, he didn't show it. He only pressed further.
What about your wish? That was why you worked for them, wasn't it?
Kim Soleum, still looking down with his head hung, let out a small, hollow chuckle.
That doesn't matter anymore. Something happened while I was working there. The progress I had built up for my wish was completely reset. That's when it finally hit me.
Daydream Inc.'s wish ticket system did grant wishes, but the company could decide at any time to deny an individual their reward, completely at their own discretion, unreasonably and unfairly.
That I had been throwing my life away, working indefinitely in that nightmarish place for something that could be erased at a moment's notice.
Ryu Jaekwon gritted his teeth. The words "I told you not to believe in that nonsense about wishes" almost slipped out, but somehow or another he held them back.
Don't worry. Since I've already been officially declared dead, I can't accumulate performance points or withdraw anymore anyway.
The bitter smile slowly faded from Kim Soleum's face. What remained was emptiness.
And once that happened, I didn't have anything left to do. So, I remembered the business card you gave me and applied to the Disaster Management Bureau.
Then he shrank back slightly.
If that offended you, I apologize.
Suddenly, Ryu Jaekwon felt as if he had been pressuring someone for something completely unreasonable. A guilt that settled deep in his chest. It was the kind of guilt one might feel if, after rescuing a civilian from a supernatural disaster, that same agent grabbed the civilian by the collar and demanded a detailed explanation of what had happened to them. Here was a victim who had tried against all odds to live morally despite the circumstances. The guilt of psychologically cornering someone who had barely escaped from the immoral grip of a corrupt company. During the interview, Ryu Jaekwon had singled him out, going as far as putting him under excessive scrutiny. And even now, he had called him in separately and was practically interrogating him. On top of that, Kim Soleum had already lost everything. His goal, his affiliation, even the one thing that had kept him tied to that company. And yet, perhaps with some expectations, Kim Soleum still chose to come here. The kind of work the Supernatural Disaster Management Bureau did, protecting citizens from supernatural disasters, ghosts, unidentified life forms, and unknown phenomena, was the complete opposite of what Daydream Inc. stood for. Given their past encounters, if Kim Soleum had entered this agency with even a sliver of hope or a sense of purpose, Ryu Jaekwon clenched his fist. He's not about to punch me, is he? I stared, cold sweat forming as Agent Bronze's hand clenched into a fist. I had said everything I needed to. Seems like he's buying it. So why the hell was he making a fist? I kept my head down, keeping my face carefully neutral, and waited in silence for a few seconds. And then, the watch on Agent Bronze's wrist suddenly let out a blaring alarm. So that's why he clenched his fist. The moment Agent Bronze stepped out the door, I let out a long sigh and sank to the floor. The only time I've ever lied this hard to a good person was during a game of Mafia. And now I was deceiving a civil servant so I could spy on a government agency. I was sweating bullets. At this rate, I might be able to take a bath in my cold sweat. But the important thing was, he believes me, right? It seemed like he did. I took note of how Agent Bronze had gradually spoken less and less, how his gaze had shifted into something almost sympathetic. As long as that sympathy wasn't the kind reserved for criminals on their way to a high-security cell, then Contadient Kim Soleum was no longer under suspicion. I wiped the cold sweat off my temple. They say a great scam is 90% truth and 10% lies, and unintentionally, I had kept that ratio quite well. For the record, neither of my fellow spies who infiltrated the Disaster Management Bureau had to go through this mess.
Director Ho, about my fellow batchmates who,
Oh, they've already entered.
until last month, we had a direct recruitment pathway into the Bureau, so they got in right away.
Which meant I had to suffer through this entire ordeal alone. Go Yongin. Jang-hyun, I don't know where you've been assigned within the Bureau, but please. Just relax, enjoy yourselves. And if things go south, please come save me. Was it selfish to hope my batchmates were safe and comfortable purely so I could use them later? But right now, the only thing that mattered was, where exactly am I getting assigned? It wasn't too hard to figure out. Let's see. Based on the something, the 3 main divisions that Disaster Management Bureau agents were assigned to after completing their 3-week probation were, there are 3 major units. Simply put, these are the 3 main stages of handling supernatural disasters.
1. Preliminary Investigation Unit. A reconnaissance team that analyzes newly emerging ghost stories, assesses their progression and threat level, and reports findings. Their job is to track down rumored ghost stories, both online and offline, and categorize them. Of course, unlike Daydream Inc., they don't just throw agents into a disaster site and force them to create a manual on the spot, as they do with members of the field exploration team. Instead, they gather information and conduct investigations as safely as possible.
This really makes me realize just how insane my old job was. Then again, I'm still technically working there, as a spy, no less. That's depressing. Let's not think about it. Anyway, next was the second one.
2. Dispatch and Rescue Unit. A rapid response task force that answers civilian distress calls when they've already been caught in a supernatural disaster or urban legend. Basically, a rescue team. They'd jump into the middle of a supernatural disaster, right when things were at their most terrifying, and pull people out. It's the most dangerous assignment, but at the same time, it's considered the core of the Supernatural Disaster Management Bureau. It's the most respected unit in the agency.
And their mission reports are the most entertaining to read, too. But this is not what I'm aiming for. I've had enough excitement. I could experience thrills vicariously just fine. The one I'm targeting was
A post-disaster team responsible for restoring an affected area after a supernatural incident, ensuring that civilians remain unaware of what happened. Basically, the cleanup crew. Like crime scene cleaners, they'd go in after ghost stories had been resolved or sealed and restore the site. They were also in charge of handling documentation.
That means I'd be in charge of registering and organizing documents. This was the best role for gaining access to classified supernatural records, including those on the specific phenomenon that Director Ho mentioned. And for someone who's already read the something, this is basically free real estate. It would be as easy as editing a wiki page. Relaxing, enjoyable, no sudden death threats, and most importantly, I only go in after all the scary shit is over. In other words, it's the least terrifying unit to be assigned to. For the first time, I could finally work a government job without breaking into cold sweats. Can you hear that? The sound of my quality of life skyrocketing. And getting assigned there is simple. For the next 3 weeks, I just need to act passive and show that I have a sharp analytical mind. If I emphasize classification, documentation, and organization, basically skills suited for research, I'll be a perfect fit. And, hasn't it become obvious now? This perfectly aligns with the character I've been playing. Even better, my senior agent already knew I had past experience with supernatural incidents. And he also knew about my suspicious background. I managed to talk my way out of it. But if there's still any lingering doubt, they'll stick me in a paperwork-heavy role. Agent Bronze seemed competent. And there's no way a rational agent would expect an ex-employee of a deranged pharmaceutical company to be put in charge of saving people. With a quiet sigh of relief, I got to my feet. Just in time, the agent returned. He's probably going to tell me to go home now. Before I could react, something was tossed into my hands. An identification pass? It looked like an access badge, but I had already received one earlier during the appointment ceremony.
New recruits are usually assigned to a unit after completing 3 weeks of training in pairs.
But I had no way of expecting what came next.
However, I've taken the liberty of assigning you to a unit myself. From this moment forward, you're in the same unit as me.
If Agent Bronze's unit is, I had a terrible feeling. I flipped over the badge I was holding.
Assigned unit. Dispatch and Rescue Unit, Black Turtle Snake Team 1.
As of this moment, you are part of Turtle Snake Team 1. Coincidentally, we've just received a rescue call. We'll be entering a disaster zone immediately to extract civilians from the scene. Follow me.
My persuasion check landed a nat 20 in the weirdest place. I'm on the Disaster Management Bureau's rescue team. Huh? Having to go into a ghost story to save civilians, when I can barely look after myself as it is. And I even had to enter a ghost story right this moment to rescue someone. Exactly an hour and 30 minutes had passed since I finished the aptitude test and was appointed. Yet, here I was, already receiving agent gear at headquarters due to the urgent directive Agent Bronze had received. And now I was riding a Disaster Management Bureau bicycle, heading toward the site of the ghost story. Riding a bike in this cold, through the dark, makes me shiver, and so many thoughts run through my head.
Citizens caught up in a disaster can request rescue using the number provided on the Bureau's informational leaflets.
And I'm also aware that this number sometimes miraculously works, even inside the ghost story. Just listening to this impromptu rescue briefing, which was so like the Disaster Management Bureau, was already making my head spin. I kept pedaling mechanically after the agent.
When entering a disaster, traveling by bicycle is actually safer than going by car.
Yes, since most means of transportation either don't work inside ghost stories, or else trigger some of the worst mishaps. It was a fun world-building tidbit when I was only reading about it, but experiencing it in reality was really cold and grueling. For reference, the gear I received this time was more extensive than what I had as a temporary agent. A glass handgun, an iron badge, a notebook, and a fishing line.
Whatever you do, don't lose the fishing line. It's the tool you'll need to make an emergency solo escape in this disaster.
Remembering what happened when I was a temporary agent left me slightly uneasy, though I can't deny there was a bit of excitement too. Which ghost story am I entering right now?
The disaster we're heading into for this civilian rescue is...
Noticing my expression, Agent Bronze paused briefly, then spoke in a slightly more reassuring tone.
You don't have to be so nervous. The civilian who called for help isn't going to die just from listening to the explanation.
His kindness was somewhat misplaced.
First, let me explain everything.
All right, I get it already. Facing forward again, Agent Bronze pedaled along a deserted neighborhood bike path and spoke.
Kim Soleum C., do you remember a chain store called Lucky Mart?
They pulled out of Korea 11 years ago, but they're still well known in English-speaking countries. Agent?
Yes, I've heard of them.
It's more than just heard of. I know it so well, it's practically a problem. A giant supermarket chain by the name of Lucky Mart. It became the motif for a certain ghost story. Back in the earliest days when it had still been archived under the Supernatural Disaster Management Bureau, this ghost story was the 7th original ghost story documented. People rushing to find a supermarket late at night would stumble on a Lucky Mart branch by chance and go in.
A ghost story featured in Disaster Management Bureau registration number 1793 PSY 2001.NA31, a bizarre phenomenon mimicking a large-scale shopping mall, trapping those who enter to wander forever, unable to escape, associated with at least 300 disappearances over the course of decades. It's classified by the Bureau as a fracture-sanctioned disaster. A known method to end or seal it does not exist, and proactively preventing disappearances is likewise impossible. However, informational leaflets assisting individuals in escaping have been placed throughout this ghost story mart. Using those leaflets, certain citizens managed to return to reality, and their reports formed the basis for the exploration record.
A massive shopping mall. A setting that feels comfortable and familiar in everyday life, yet also one that magnifies fear with its vast mechanical repetition, making for a thrilling, chilling story. That is, when you're just reading it. It's fracture-sanctioned. Compared to the Bureau's classification, it's 2 whole tiers above that mountain lodge swarming with a serial killer where I met Agent Bronze. If this were Daydream Inc. standards, it'd be close to B grade. I broke out in a cold sweat as I turned it over in my head. Have there been many cases where a Disaster Management Bureau agent entered Lucky Mart to rescue civilians and brought them out safely? Mostly. I think they got out fine. Sure, there were plenty of special cases in the exploration records where things went wrong. But typically, the wiki focuses in detail on such exceptional situations, so maybe it's nothing to stress over. Damn. I do want to see it for myself, though. I have no idea why the item still isn't repaired. The memorial popscocked. I recalled my checking item, which still had unset adhesive on it, and let out a silent sigh. That person told me it would definitely be fixed in a month. That agent who pretended to be a Dokabi didn't seem like he was lying. It must be one of 2 things. Either because it came out of that merch box, so the repair didn't go through properly, or because I spent the past month in a ghost story, so it didn't count as a proper period of time. In either case, I need a backup plan. Lucky Mart was such a famous ghost story that I could pretty much remember all its details. In that sense, I guess I should be thankful it's a named ghost story. But there'll come a time when this kind of luck won't cut it. Whenever I'd recall that time on the Tamara Express, where I couldn't remember anything about the owner of the Silver Heart, it would still send chills down my spine. To avoid another crisis like that, the memorial popsock was absolutely necessary.